an issue with your own IT. Okay. Well, I'm not sure if you guys got my the PowerPoint that I sent out beforehand. Do you guys happen to have access to that?
We're about to pull it up and see.
Okay, that's going to help you along the way for most of this webinar. We are going to do a demonstration of the software, but if you aren't able to kind of follow along with that on your screen, we will work together to make sure that you're completely up to speed outside of this webinar.
I got it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys. Does it seem to be working?
Well, on the PowerPoint.
That'll be at least a good way to follow along for a good section of today's webinar. Detroit team, do we have Ingham with us? Okay. How Kalamazoo?
Here.
Well, team. Our team, are you with us?
Joan Dyer. I'm the only person who had the time to actually get on the webinar, so I'm going to cover for Melissa and for Tara Taylor, who is going to do the, she already looked at the PowerPoint, and she's going to trust my judgment, I guess.
We're happy to have you, Joan. Thank you for representing your team.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else on the call that I didn't call out? Thank everyone for joining us again. Just a couple of logistic pieces that I think are helpful to remind everyone. Like our quarterly CQI webinars, this isn't going to be quite as interactive as it typically is for us when we get together on webinars. So what I ask is that that everyone puts their phones on mute so that we can all hear the information clearly. This is also being recorded today, so there are members of your team teams that might not be here with us. This is going to be available for them after the webinar ends. I'll make sure that I send out the link so that if anybody wants to view this later as they're working through practicing this new system, they can follow along, or you might want to pass it along to team members who aren't able to be with us today. But because it's being recorded, that's extra helpful to make sure that we're placing the phones on mute. I hear that someone joined. By any chance, was that our Ingham team? Go ahead and move forward and do is give a basic overview to what we're talking about today. Our screen has frozen right now. There we go. Oh, technical difficulties. They're really riddling us today. I've already gotten a little bit of a tease as to why we're talking today. So this is all along the lines of talking about our McVie benchmark data collection protocol. So we're going to talk a little bit about that just to orient all of us to why we're here together today. We're going to talk about REDCap, and that's the name of the system that we'll be using moving forward to enter the McVie data. We're going to go through the updated process and just give a brief overview. And what I think is going to be really rich for you all today is we're going to do a live demonstration of what the data entry process will look like for you all. We'll talk more specifically about data submission and how that might be a little bit different moving forward, as well as rectification requests. We'll talk about the accounts and training aspect of using the REDCap data system, and also just talk about some next steps of moving forward in rolling out this new updated protocol. So I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to kind of orient all of us to the same place. So we're starting out on the same page. We're talking about McVie benchmark data collection, data entry, and data submission. But just backing up to that basic McVie benchmark data collection aspect, this is nothing new, generally speaking. Submitting McVie benchmark data, it's something that's been a contractual requirement for our Michigan NFP home visiting programs, and a lot of what we're doing isn't going to change. As you all know, this system has been very much heavily paper-based, and we're moving to a little bit different of a system in which electronic data entry and data submission is going to be electronic. A lot of this is coming from feedback we heard from you guys. We know that the trips to the post office have been cumbersome. We know that that hasn't been a terribly convenient way of getting us your data packets. We hear that, and this is something that we've been working on for quite some time to alleviate that burden on you all. About this time last year, we actually started a pilot of this electronic data entry and submission system that started in April of 2014 with our Calhoun NFP site, and they've been doing electronic data entry and submission ever since they kind of hopped onto that Michigan Home Visiting Initiative through McV. And we've been learning a lot about their experience through this, tweaking things along the way. And at this point, we're ready to transition all of our NFP local implementing agencies in Michigan to REDCap electronic data entry and submission process. So I'm using the word REDCap, and maybe I should have started with this, but what is REDCap? REDCap, it's essentially the brand name of the electronic data collection system that we're using. So this is going to be the system that you all use moving forward for entering your data and submitting it to us. This is an internet-based system, and this is really important because especially as we're troubleshooting through all of these technical issues, even just getting onto WebEx, this is not something that you have to download onto your computer. This is not an app you need to purchase. This is internet-based. So you'll basically go to a link that likely you'll quickly have bookmarked on your internet browser. You will need to have internet access, but you'll essentially go to that link, and that's where you'll enter your data and submit it to us. It's important for you all to know that the REDCap server is housed on one of our MPHI secure data servers, and because it's web-based, it's accessible at any point in time through the internet. So view of this new process. Let's walk through the major steps in the McV data collection process. So start with data reminders, and this is something that that is not new to you all. The process will look similar to what it looked like before. Each hour, local implementing agencies will receive both a quarterly reminder and then that same broken down monthly reminder that you guys have been getting for quite some time now from Paul Jacobson. You'll still be getting those. They're going to look a little bit different because they're going to be active worksheets for you to work on, but we'll walk through that process in a minute. Essentially, though, it's important to note you'll be getting data reminders the same way that you were before. In terms of data collection, this has not changed. We have the same processes as before. Our nurse home visitors are going to continue to collect the McV benchmark data through ETO. That's how you get most of your information that is required through McV over to us, but also that supplemental data collection form and the protective factors survey at the McV prescribed intervals. So data collection does not look different. We aren't collecting new pieces of data, and we aren't changing up the intervals in which we need the data. So that piece will stay the same. Data entry, things have changed here. Data is actually going to happen within each individual local implementing agency. Before, you would send us the forms and Paul would enter everything into REDCap. That's going to change moving forward. Right now, once we roll this out, that's something that each of our sites will do. We think that this is something that might fit really nicely alongside your ETO data entry process and protocol because they're both web-based. We think this might be a really easy piggyback for you guys. And it's important to note that all of the data collected on that supplemental data collection form in the PFS will now be entered into the electronic REDCap system. Submission changes a little bit also. We're going to walk through each of these sections in a little bit more detail, but it's important to know that submission will largely look the same. Moving forward, we'll have the same deadlines in which all data must be entered by that particular submission date of the month. For the time being, for a few months, we're going to ask that paper forms continue to be sent for a temporary basis. I really want to make sure I stress that this is a temporary aspect because it's exactly what we're moving away from. But while all of our sites get comfortable with the electronic data entry and submission system, we want to make sure that we have a good backup in place and have a way to check the quality assurance of the data that are coming in. So for a short period of time, you'll continue to send the paper forms to us, and our goal will certainly be to get you all done with sending us paper forms as soon as we feel like, and you feel like your site really has the electric system down. You actually use that electronic reminder that Paul will send you earlier in the month or the quarter. You're going to use that checklist to keep track of all the forms that your team enters into REDCap. And you'll actually top off your data submission of the month by sending us through email that checklist over to Paul. And we'll go through that in more detail right now, but I wanted to give you that 30,000-foot view of how things are the same and how things are different. So I assume that we'll still be doing the data reminders. We've gotten good feedback that this is an important system for a lot of you all to just get the heads up of the forms that we think might be coming to us. You'll still be getting those data reminders in 2 different intervals. We'll send you a reminder of everything that we expect to get in a quarter, but then we'll also be sure to break down by month what forms we expect that month. This is a little bit different, as I mentioned, because this will actually be an active worksheet that we ask you to fill out and return to us. You'll use this check sheet in 2 ways, this checklist in 2 ways. The first, as I mentioned, it's that reminder just to get a sense of what forms will be due to MPHI for McV reporting. But also, this is a way that you're going to let us know by completing and submitting it to us on a monthly basis to let us know which forms have been added to the REDCap data system. And you can see here we've got a big red arrow and a circle around entered into REDCap. That's actually the active checklist that you guys will be able to use to let us know when an ETO an ETO client has had their forms entered into REDCap. So it's a pretty simple checklist that you'll just send back to us in email. I meant data collection has not changed. It's the same process as always. We're still focusing on completing that NFP supplemental data collection form and the PFS, all, if applicable, at the prescribed intervals that McV reporting asks for. So the same forms and the same PFSs at enrollment, postpartum, 6-month, 12-month, 18-month, or 24-month visits. Data collection hasn't changed. It's mostly in that new updated checklist that you'll get for your reminder. It's in data entry happening at your site, and it's also just a little bit of change in submission. So that's just a brief overview of what those steps will look like, but we think it might be most helpful for you all to just get a feel for what REDCap looks like. So we want to take a few minutes also to just walk you through that software system and get kind of your feet wet on what this will look like. And to do that, I'm actually going to pass you guys over to my trusted colleague, Carrie Soroka, who's going to walk you through REDCap.
Hi, this is the fun part of our webinar today. At least I think I got the fun part. Thank you, Angie, for giving us the intro. And Angie mentioned we are taping this, so you'll have a chance to kind of look at this again. You'll also be getting a user guide, and that will be sent over on email as well. So that will have a lot of more detail about what you'll see on REDCap. It can hopefully answer some questions you have and has some troubleshooting guides as well. So there is lots of assistance for you. There's lots of help. There's lots of us here to help you out. And I'm just going to give you a quick demo here. And one of the things that Angie mentioned was that this is a web-based system. So I'm taking you now to our web. A new tab, and so this is how you will go about entering your REDCap site as well. You'll get the link from us along with a username and a password, and you can bookmark the link like Angie suggested. Oh, wanting to take me to Angie's favorite places. I have to tell it not to go there.
While Carrie finds the REDCap link, I just wanted to also add out there, this we know, this is kind of a big transition for you all, and there's a lot of nuances to doing this kind of entry. I want to remind everybody of what Carrie already said, that you're going to be getting this recording, you're also going to be getting a REDCap user guide, and you're going to have plenty of time to practice this software. So I really want to invite you all to just kind of sit back and listen to Carrie and watch as she walks you through this. I think it could feel really daunting when you're faced with a new system like this and you might be scribbling to take notes. You'll also be getting a bumped PowerPoint presentation that actually walks through all of the aspects that Carrie is going to take you in the demonstration. So I just want to invite you all to not feel like you need to take furious notes, but rather just kind of sit back and get familiar with the REDCap system as she walks you through. There's not going to be a quiz on this quite yet, and you have plenty of time to practice.
All right, so when you first log on, this is the screen that you'll see. It's the general REDCap screen. It has a tab here for My Projects, and this is where you'll head every time you come into REDCap. And once you come into My Projects, there's one project title there for you, and that's the Home Visitation. So that's where you'll be heading every time you open up REDCap. When you first open it up, it shows a lot of stuff in the middle of this page that actually is not handy at all for data entry. The links that you will be using when you enter are these here on the left. And data collection, there's the record status dashboard, and the add and edit records. And that's pretty much where you'll find yourself all the time. At that point, you can play and explore a little bit, and you'll see there's some really cool other aspects of REDCap, and there's a little bit about that in the user guide, and REDCap has a lot of tutorials themselves. So you can explore and use those features, but we're not going to require you to do that, and we're not actually going to look into that today at all. We're just going to focus on how to enter a form into REDCap. So the first place you'll go when you sit down with a form in front of you to enter that data and information will be to the Add Edit Records area. From here, you have a couple options. You can choose an existing ETO from the drop-down box, or you can enter a new or existing one here. We're going to go ahead and enter in a full ETO ID to what they call the event grid. Confusingly enough, REDCap sometimes calls this the event grid, and sometimes they call it the status dashboard, but you'll see that it's the same table. The table has all of the different time points and forms for which you find yourself entering data. All right. Now, we have been entering data into the system. Paul has for you since about October of last year. So any forms you've sent since October of 2014 actually see here in the system already existing. So chances are you have a visit for somebody you've already seen, and you go ahead and type in their ETO ID, it should show up for you. And not only will it show up, but a couple of these little dots will be colored in to show which forms already have information in them. What you need to do is select the appropriate dot for the time point for which you need to enter data. If it's a new form, you can utilize the enrollment here. If it's postpartum, you'll select this one. It is very important that you select the correct time point for the form that you're entering. And we'll talk about that again in a minute. And I'll do is select the spot, and it opens up. This is what the form looks like online. Just a couple new fields, which we'll talk about as we go through, but everything should look, for the most part, as it does on paper. So I'm going to point out a couple things right away, and that's that I like to look right here at this adding new ETO ID. It either says adding new or it just says the ETO ID that exists. You will always want to stop and take a moment and double check this ID. You'll want to make sure you're entering data for the right ETO ID. On our end, we really don't have any way of knowing if it's the incorrect data on the wrong one. And you'll also want to make sure that the event name is definitely the event name for the visit that you're looking for. So that postpartum or the enrollment. And you go back at any point in time and make changes to your data in the system. You can make updates, you can add in new information, but the two things that you cannot change are the ETO ID and the event name. If something makes it into the wrong time point or the wrong ETO ID, you can give us a call and we can delete out the data that was in error for you, and then you can go back in and re-enter. But there's no way to relocate it to the right spot. This is new. All we would like is for you to simply click the Today button. It'll put the date right in there for you, and you can move on and keep going. This date just gives us a placeholder to know what day the data entry began as opposed to when it was collected. And so we won't update that either when you go back later if you ever open the record again. We want that date to stay the same. but the rest should be quite familiar to you. You know, home visitor name, date of the visit, your program is here in this drop-down box, and then you get to the form was completed for which visit question. This is a very important question. So this question is important for two things. One is to set up the questions in the remainder of the form. When you select the right time point, it will make sure that the right questions show up for you for the rest of the form. So if you're looking for something and you don't see it or a question seems missing, come back up here and make sure you've got the right time point for yourself. For today, I'm going to select the postpartum. I can make sure that the rest of the questions show up on my questionnaire. And you'll note there are some drop-down boxes that have all the responses that you're used to seeing on the paper form. You'll see as we move through that there are some questions, such as this one, for the grades, where you're able to check all that apply. Check many of them there, as many as you need to. You will protective factors section and see that at first glance the rest of the protective factors questions are not here, but they're actually embedded into this particular question with some skip logic. If you select yes, it will view the rest of the questions where you can enter the rest of the information for that particular survey. If you select no, it will ask to explain why the PFS was not administered. If you need to, you can click the reset button to clear that data out and to start that question all over again. Okay. Same thing happens when you get down to the home a little bit lower. So here we've transitioned. There are not two set web pages, but both of the pages of the form are here, included in one long web page. So this is where we split over to what used to be, or still is in the paper form, the second page. And multiple response options. And we get to the service needs and referral table, where I'd like to pause for a minute. This is the one other thing that does look a little different and actually behaves slightly differently online. Again, we have these lists of possible service needs areas. So food assistance, child care, domestic violence, so on and so forth. And for each one, we start off by saying yes or no if there is a service need. Now, in the paper form, you would just check yes if it was yes. On the online version, we do need one of those to be selected for each question. So you will need to take the action of saying no if it's a no. It does have a little text reminder here on the left in red that says must provide value, and you'll see that in a couple places on the REDCap form. That's a reminder there to let you know that at some point a value will need to be entered for that. You can save the form and close without entering that data right away. It does not go away after you enter data into the field either, so it's just a handy reminder. If you do select yes, that there's a need, you'll see the next question pops open for you. It keeps in that manner that if there's a referral provided, it's going to open up why not the family contacted the agency. Coming to this table and you would like to put in a referral or the fact that the family contact, but you don't see that question, you will probably need to start with the need, make sure that it says yes. You need to reset it to clear the value out, and then you can start the process of opening subsequent questions again. Okay. One of the most important things I'd like to point out is the save. This hovers here on the right, and it follows down with you as you scroll through the page. And REDCap was also nice enough to give us some more save buttons here on the bottom. You have to click a save button for it to save. It does not automatically save at any point in time. If you navigate away by using the backwards and forward arrows on your browser, the data you enter just disappears into nowhere. So you do need to click the save button. You can do that at the very beginning. You can do it at any point in time. You can do it actually without entering anything into the form. So don't feel like you have to finish your data entry or you'll lose it. Just go ahead and click save when you need to, and you can return and make updates later. Okay. The last to point out is this little form status here, complete and incomplete. This is not something that MPHI is going to monitor, and it's not something that's required for our data entry process, but it is handy to know about it. So I'm going to show you what it does. There's these three different status options, and choose a status option and you save your record. I mentioned that these fields, it says, note, they're required. These are all the ones that have that red, must provide value on it. So it'll let you ignore this warning and leave, and then you just have to come back another time to finish answering either a yes or a no to all those. We're going to leave. And we'll look at the colors. When I changed that last question, the complete status, to the unverified, you'll see here's our little legend, that's what changed the color of this button. So it is actually possible to have entered some data into here and to not change that last question, and when you come back here, it will look blank. It'll look like there's nothing there. You don't need to panic, it's okay, your data's all still there as long as you click save. The one thing you will need to know though is that you're utilizing this as a supervisor or you're utilizing it in your agency for case management, that you'll need to come up with a constant way for everybody to approach that question. So I encourage you to think about that these next 2 weeks while you have this trial period, and to explore this and to see what that process is like for you. And if that's something that's helpful, you can set up your own internal process of how you want to deal with that, asking everybody perhaps to turn them all to complete when they're done. It's not necessary for us, and we will not be monitoring that status at all. So that's basically the whole process of entering a form, saving a form. Just as before, we might have some rectification questions for you occasionally. Angie's going to touch on that in a minute and show you what that process will look like. But while we're in here, I'm going to take a moment and show you how you can go back and change some of your data. Go back to any form that already has data entered into it. Use the Add Edit Records area, just as before. Or there is a record status dashboard. And it looks pretty much the same. You'll see all these same columns, same colored buttons, but it lists all of the existing ETO IDs for your agency. Okay? Each agency has their own login. Each agency will have a list of all the active ETO IDs, but you will not be able to see the other agency's data there. Okay? So there's another way to come in. And the only other thing that is a little bit different here, selecting this exit form. You might have noticed this over here and have wondered, what is this exit column over here? The exit column allows us an online data set to see when we're done entering data for a family. It just closes out a family. It basically says we're no longer going to be entering data for them. If it's an early exit before the 2-year visit, you will go here and just select this. You see for this record, it kind of looks like this family might have been an early exit. There's some information entered, and then we have an exit. Or if you get all the way to the infant 2-year and you click on the infant 2-year and you enter that data, please also exit that family. And you'll see all it is one question where you say, yes, they exited. And all it takes for the system to know that we're done collecting data for that family. Okay. Before I exit here, does anyone have any burning questions or things that you're curious about or concerned about how it might work on this online system? Play and explore. It's actually quite simple to get the basic gist of it, but you might find yourself with some questions, and that's what we're here for at any time. REDCap does have their own help little system, and we've also will send out our user guide. And so hope that also helps you out along the way. So I'm going to get back out of here and bring this back over to our PowerPoint here for Angie so she can continue telling you about the rest of the process.
So Carrie has given us a nice demonstration to see what data entry will look like. I've given you a little glimpse into how the reminder process is going to look the same with a couple of caveats. The entry is going to look a specific way. It happened at your LIA, but then the data submission piece is a little bit different as well. So let me walk through that updated process for a moment. So by the close of each month, we ask that all data be entered online for the visits that would be covered in your packets that you send to us. I have a hunch that a lot of you may end up entering this data throughout the month as you possibly enter your ETO forms. That'll be up to you guys to determine your own internal process. but we do ask that by the end of the month, all forms be entered, all supplemental data collection forms and protective factor surveys be entered into the REDCap data system. This next piece is not new at all. We ask that each local implementing agency checks their monthly submission in a couple of ways. We want to make sure that at least one person at each LIA is checking to make sure that all data that's been requested has been entered, making sure that forms are complete and there aren't big missing gaps in the data that we collect. Scanning all forms, this is a bit more relevant to the paper forms that will still come in for a small period of time, making sure that all forms have been checked and no personally identifiable information has been included, and removing anything that is there. And looking through that electronic data reminder request checklist to know that everything's been entered, that notes have been indicated, and that all new enrollments and early exits are included in that reminder checklist. This process looks different for each of you, and that's okay. Everyone's done something a little bit different that meets the needs of their program, and I'll encourage you to really think about how to do the same in this updated process. But really what matters in this step is that we're scanning through, making sure that everything that's been requested in the reminders has been entered, that there's no personally identifiable information being sent to NPHI electronically or through the paper submission that you'll do for a small period of time, and you'll be sending us that completed checklist and send that to us electronically over to Paul, along with your packet of forms that will still come in the mail just for a temporary period of time to be received by NPHI on or before that data submission deadline that's typically been the 5th business day of every month. Also have the same process essentially of asking for clarification when things are missing or somehow seem unclear, and we call this our data rectification process. After we review your monthly data submissions, you may receive, just like before, a rectification request by email if anything's missing or if there are any questions that we have or if corrections are needed in the data that you enter into REDCap. In a given month, if your program receives a rectification request, we'll ask you to do a couple of things. This is actually a screenshot of what the rectification request will look like. So the first thing that we'll ask you to do, and this should look for the most part similar to what you are already getting from Paul. You'll first go ahead and take a look at the issue column and take a look at the requested action column to see what we're looking for and how we're asking you to resolve that particular issue. The second step is to go do Sherlock Holmesing that you all already do. Investigate those data issues. You might need, if you aren't the nurse home visitor who collected this information, you might need to collect that. And going into REDCap, and as Carrie showed you, make the adjustments in the form that we're asking for, the additional piece of information that we have questions on. Here's where things are a little bit different. We have to ask you all to note your rectification action or other notes in that far right column. You'll see it filled in red with the big arrow there. We need you to tell us when you've made changes in REDCap. And when everything is done on your rectification list and you've checked all the boxes and gone through each of the issues that we've asked, we will ask you then to submit this completed document by email over to Paul by the deadline that he sends over. I think this is kind of an important piece to remind you all of, or actually to bring up, not only in the data submission, but also in the rectification process, that in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to tell us when you enter forms into REDCap. But to be truthful, that is something that just does not come with this particular level of data system. So we do need that nudge or that tickle from you all when you enter a form or when you change a form. Otherwise, there's really not a way for us to know on the back end that something has been added for us to be paying attention to. So that's why you see these two new pieces of first, you do submission, letting us know what forms you've been added, but then during the rectification process, giving us the heads up to where you've changed things. Just a little bit of information about the REDCap accounts and training. In terms of usernames and passwords, it's important to note that each LIA have their own username and password. We are going to email you your preset username and an initial password from there on out, each LIA is going to manage their own account password and contact information. I anticipate a common question, especially at the beginning, being, will each person who enters data get their own unique username and password? No, it's actually going to be specific only to each site level, and if you have multiple people entering data, they'll share the same username and password. But what's important for you to know also, as Carrie mentioned, that information is only going to be accessible that's entered by your site, So you aren't going to be able to see any other site's information, but anybody entering data from your LIA is going to see other forms, other ETOs of your particular LIA. In terms of managing your account profile, this is pretty standard when you're working on anything that has accounts, especially online. You'll all have the opportunity to update your contact information, your password, security questions if your site wants to set those up in case passwords are forgotten. And we'll have more information about this in the REDCap user guide that you'll all get after today's webinar. There is going to be a lot of information available to you all as you practicing in the software and you're getting ready for additional training. The REDCap website itself is a pretty handy place to go if you want to look at some training videos. That information will be specific to that particular REDCap system, not necessarily McV. We'll give you more information about that. And what places you'll find that is in the user guide that we'll be sending out after today's webinar. So, of course, we want to make sure that in this process you all feel very well supported. There's a couple of different ways that you are all going to be getting help moving forward. Of course, I out of the gate want to say we are always here in case questions come up. Please don't hesitate to connect with MPHI if you need any help in using this REDCap system, any help in getting used to the process itself, or if your site really wants to walk through and troubleshoot ways to streamline this process for your program. I would love to sit and brainstorm that with you all. So feel free to give me a call or any member of our team here. The MPHI staff that you've heard their voices earlier, we can provide a lot of support, particularly technical assistance regarding data entry. Paul has become quite a wizard at doing this because he's been doing it for quite some time now with all the forms you've been sending him. We'll be providing some assistance with quality assurance in checking to see how things are being entered, comparing them against your forms for a while. And also, if you want to start exploring ways to export the data that you send to us, we would love to walk you through some of those very cool options in REDCap. Just a quick moment of caution. We ask that you don't use the link within the REDCap site to email the REDCap administrator unless you're having difficulty logging into the account. So you'll see a link actually on REDCap that's something along the lines of contact REDCap administrator. That's a great place to go if you can't get into your account, but not a great place to go if you're confused about how to enter a form. That's something that I will help you with, Paul will help you with, or Carrie will help you with. So be in touch with MPHI anytime something comes up that you have a question about. This is a really helpful way to just kind of think about the changes moving forward, thinking about what's the same and what is new in the McV benchmark data collection, entry, and submission process. So looking at those monthly data reminders, you're still going to be receiving those monthly data reminders from MPHI, specifically from Paul, same as before, but what's different about them is that they're going to be actual electronic worksheets that you can check the boxes when things have been entered REDCap, and you'll return that checklist to MPHI when it's time for data submission. The supplemental data collection form, a lot has stayed the same. The form is the same, the questions are the same. We're still asking for this data at the same specific time frames, and there's still this process for completion. What's a little bit different now is just what Carrie showed you, that needs and referral table. It looks a little bit different in the REDCap system than it does on the back page of the supplemental data collection form. This actually, I think, is a really big perk because it's something that our teams have been asking for quite some time, of having a little bit more logic built into the service needs table. So I actually think you guys are going to like that change moving forward. Data submission has changed a bit. The same the deadlines are what we're asking for in terms of data being received by the 5th business day of the following month. For the time being, paper forms will continue to be sent to us as we help you all transition over to a full electronic system. What's going to be a bit different is that each local implementing agency will be entering the data online themselves and submitting that data reminder checklist to us when they're done entering forms for the month. Still be getting monthly data rectification requests from MPHI if we have any questions about the data that you've entered. But what's new about this is that we'll ask you to make the changes yourself within the REDCap system and submit that rectification checklist back to us when you've made all of your rectifications for the month. So we actually have some next steps, and I want to make sure that you guys know that in just a minute you can ask all the questions that you can. We're almost there. We have some next steps that we'd like to share from you, or share with you. I mentioned already that there's some things that you're going to be getting from me when we're done with this webinar. I'm going to be sending out the REDCap user guide. I'm going to be sending out the full PowerPoint. You all got the shorter version that just had space for a demo, but I'll actually send you the PowerPoint that has every step that Carrie walked you through in that demonstration process, and also send out a basic outline, sort of a summary of the new process moving forward. We wanted to make sure that we built in some time for you all to play around with REDCap, train yourselves on it, and really get acclimated and get your feet wet in the system. So we have a training period set up towards the end of the month. Between May 18th and May 29th, we'll actually have a REDCap, aspect of REDCap open to you all for training purposes. I'm actually going to send you all a login and some sample family ETO information. We want to make sure that you're using the sample information that I send to you during that trial period. We have to close it for a certain period of time. So on May 29th, that training period closes, and this is for the very simple reason that we actually need to enter data into REDCap at that point that's coming in from you all, so that's why the training period is a little bit shortened. Make sure that you're using the sample family ETO ID that I send. Do not enter any actual data during that training period, and this is because the way that REDCap is set up, you all are getting access to our training account, and you will be able to see each other's data that you enter. So we want to make sure that it's pretend data, that nobody has access to true data of clients that are active in your system. So I remind you of that when I send along the training login and password, but I can't say that enough, that we want to make sure during the training period we are not entering real information. It's just a practice time. Before June 1st, 2014, but actually of 2015, I'm going to send you, each of our local implementing agencies will get their account usernames, and that initial password will come from me electronically. And your brain, I'm sure, is naturally going to, when does all of this go live? So moving forward, the May visits that you're seeing right now and collecting data for, they're due to us on June 6th. We're going to follow the same process that we have right now. So you'll do the same hard copy submission process. You will be doing REDCap data entry for all of the forms that you're collecting right now that are due to us in June. But when you start seeing people in June, and when that data submission is due to us in July, that will be your first aspect of data entry that we'll be asking you to do electronically. We'll ask that you send your paper forms over to us and that you make sure everything's entered into REDCap by that fifth business day of July, which actually ends up being July 7th of 2015. We will be working with you very closely as you make this transition, and what we'll ask is to continue the paper paper submission through September, unless we've kind of ended that trial period earlier for you. But we'll work with you on an individual basis. It's really important just to know to continue sending your hard copy forms until we notify you to stop, essentially. Basic next steps, and that's just the basic skeleton. So moving forward, you have some information that will come from me to summarize everything that we've talked about, to start thinking about what this really looks like with your teams. But initially off the bat, I'd really like to just open up and have a couple minutes to see what questions you all have for us.
And Heather has a question. I have a question about if there's a client that has an early exit, do I just mark it as exit? Automatically know that it's early depending on where that client should be?
Yes, great question, Heather. And yes, if there's an early exit, all you need to do is open up that exit form, click the yes button that yes, an exit occurred, and we kind of take it from there. Great question, Heather. Thank you. As you learn about this new system, everyone. Incredibly thorough, or you're really, really confused, or everybody signed off. I'm not sure which one. So let's throw out another question. I'd really like to get some feedback and hear from you all. Now that you've gotten a sense of this electronic system, how do you feel about this? Does this feel like something that's going to fit smoothly along with your processes? Do you feel like we need to do a little bit more work with each site to help you guys feel comfortable with this? What does this feel like to you all as we roll this out?
Getting on the training session and working with the that will help us decide if we need more help.
I think that's a really, really good point, and that's actually one reason why we wanted to make sure that we did give you a couple of weeks to be able to play around with it. I anticipate that you guys might start, you might play around with REDCap during that training period. That's a great time to give us a call if you're in it and you're wondering why something didn't work the way you thought it would, or you have questions about sort of the logic that we set up. That's a great time to give us a call or shoot us an email and ask any further questions. I'll make sure I let the group know that if there are any questions that come up that feel really universal to everyone's experience, I'll be sure to be keeping a frequently asked question log, and I'll send that out to everybody also as a resource in acclimating to this electronic system. Any about this before we end for the day?
Andrew, I have another question, please.
Yeah, please.
If you have a client that, let's say that there was a home visit, maybe the client canceled the visit and so they didn't get their information in for that month, and so it's submitted maybe this, but it should have been submitted in July. At what point, I mean, is it going to red flag you, or are you going to say you were expecting this like you normally would, or do I have to enter it in differently? Will it, like after the deadline for each month, will it close down for a certain amount of time?
Awesome question, Heather. Thank you for that. This is going to be not that different than how it is right now. If a visit doesn't happen within that time period that we expect, if a form does not come in that we've sort of expected, essentially that's going to come up for Paul. He's going to wonder why that form didn't come in, and likely it's going to show up rectification request. And on that rectification request, there's a spot to put a note where you say, client was seen at this time, or visit hasn't happened yet. You'll just kind of notify us the same way that you've done before, that they weren't seen within that window, but maybe you expect to see them within the next one, and you can always just give us a heads up on that rectification request.
There's a spot for you, Heather, on the data, reminder checklist that you'll get, where you would check the box that says it's entered into REDCap. You can also put in the notes column there. If you know the visit's coming up, say, in the next month, you can put in the note, anticipated visit next month, something of that nature to communicate that too.
Thank you. I see time, but I want to just send out one last hook if anybody has a burning question they want to make sure is answered before we end today.
Ed, County, could you make sure that I'm part of the email here so that I can get the slides, the presentation, and the information about the login username?
I do too, Joan. I may not have your contact information. Would you feel comfortable telling the group your email, or should I try to connect with you otherwise?
Oh, it's very easy too. It's Joan, Joan, dot DYER, county, so it follows the same pattern. It's just Joan Dyer instead.
Thank you for that, Joan. I really wouldn't want you to be kind of left out since you're the wolf representative of your team, but I'll be sure that you're on that information as we send things out moving forward. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, I want to be respectful and honor our time allotment of your day. I want to thank everybody for their time together and really invite you to think about this as the beginning part of our conversation together as we make this transition. You're going to get an email from me with some follow-up information for you to share with those members of your team that you think it might be relevant for, who will be an active hand in data entry and submission. There'll be some opportunities for you to practice and train yourselves along the way, but make sure that you remember that we're here alongside you to support you in transition and to make it as smooth as possible. As always, your feedback is very much welcome, so as you come across things that feel like they're working really well or maybe have some room for improvement, I would really, really invite that, and I would love to hear it from you all so that we can consider it and see how we can improve the system. So keep an open mind and open communication with us, and we will look forward to walking you through this transition. I'll end on giving you our contact information. I know at least most of the supervisors have my contact information by now, but if anybody wants to contact me or a member of my team, here is my email address and my phone number. I also want to give you some other members of my team's contact information. If you have any questions about the data reminders, the rectifications, and you need any assistance in data entry, Paul is your man. He is going to help you out with this. So here's his contact information. And here also is Carrie Soroka's contact information if you have any technical assistance needs within REDCap. And always feel free to get in touch with us. And with that, I will thank you all for your time today. I'll look forward to talking to you more about this transition as we move forward, and expect a follow-up email from me coming shortly to sort of wrap up what we've talked about and give you some next steps and some additional resources. So I'll say good afternoon, and I hope you all have a great day, and talk with you soon.